do you think that filmmakers are the real change makers and that movies can create real, long-lasting positive impact? Well, if you don't, this episode will definitely change your mind.
What the f***?
So, hi everyone, and welcome back to a fresh new episode of What the Field, a podcast by Crowd Farming, where we get to talk about all of our favorite topics in farming, sustainability, and impact. So, we're super excited for the podcast we have today because we're joined by Jolien Walhof from WaterBear Network. And here at Crowd Farming, we love WaterBear. So, I always watch stuff about regenerative agriculture on WaterBear, and it's so exciting to be able to be here and chat with you today. So thank you for coming.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Great. I think we can dive straight in. We know what WaterBear is and we're always on that platform, but could you tell us a little bit more about how it was created, what it is for our listeners who don't know maybe, and also tell us where the name comes from and the logo, because we had to Google it. It's a very original name. So
yeah, we get that question a lot. Let's start with a quick introduction. WaterBear Network has been set up around 3 or 4 years ago, really with this idea where we believe that storytelling and films can drive action and that we can connect the two. So we're an impact media company. We're using film and storytelling to drive change for our climate. We've been known, and the PR would call us more like a Netflix for nature, but we're actually a little bit more than that. And also we're going to go into this transition now of the company of really building a community of people and change makers that want to engage with the climate but are not really sure how to do it or what to do. So there's really 3 parts to our company. We produce our own films and documentaries. We do that ourselves, but also in collaboration with brands or nonprofits. We make sure that the productions that we do are as green as possible and also as inclusive as possible. The second part is that we distribute it as well. So we have an app and we have a web and we have TV channels where you can watch all kinds of short documentaries and feature documentaries, all for free. So I guess that's one of the biggest differences as well between us and other streaming platforms. We don't want to be behind a paywall, and we believe that these stories are very important for people to have access to. So we distribute also these films. And then the third part is campaigning. So impact is really important for us. So we try to connect films with actions that you can do. And we're going to develop a little bit more the app around that, because not everyone wants to do the same action. So how can we really speak to different needs and different audiences? And the name is coming from an actual water bear, or sometimes better known as a tardigrade. They are a microscopic creature, and they're one of the most resilient creatures of the planet. So they can survive under extreme temperatures. They can even be found on the moon. So it's really a symbol of the resilience that we and our planet need in these times.
I love that.
I'm super curious, Jolien, from what you said on 2 things. How was this idea born? Because, okay, let's do a platform within all of the platforms that already exist, but to encourage people to take action. And then how do people actually take action?
Good question. So it was initially set up, so it was founded by a woman called Ellen. She ran a production studio for 30 years, where she produced a lot of nature documentaries that will be distributed on the televisions and on big channels. And after 30 years, she just realized that she just wanted to disrupt the media industry. There's only a certain type of stories that really break through. A lot of the big television networks or streaming platforms only want to distribute stories that also are a lot entertaining. And there was just not a lot of space for important impact films and stories. We're also hearing that a lot from filmmakers, for example, that premiere their film at film festivals, but then it's very hard to get the film seen on other places. So they really wanted to set it up as sort of a disruptor in the media industry to try to be free, to showcase all the important stories, but also connect it with NGOs and with action. So we have what's called both campaign cards, but also pop-ups in the video. So while you're watching a video or at the end of the video, there will be a pop-up with an action that you can do. That's one of the ways, but we also do separate campaigning. And we just did a big research within our own community and also with the broader, the audience that we want to reach. And we just found that around 70% of the people said they want to create change, but only 30% knows what to do. So we really want to be that place where people can find sort of like, how can I be part of a good future? How can I be part of solutions? Because a lot of people are aware about all of the things that are happening, but feel a bit stuck on like, how can I get involved as an individual? So it's a part of films where films can really inspire people to get to know about a topic that they didn't knew before, or to inspire to live your life very differently, but also giving the tools to then do something afterwards. And that part is something that we're exploring further, because as I said, not everyone wants to do the same action. Not everyone has the same equal access to money or time, or have the same needs. So we're going to test, especially in the month of June, around the topic of oceans. We're going to test with a lot of different types of actions and campaigns, how people can get involved, and different content items, to get more and more data and insights on that, and to really, improve that on an ongoing basis.
That's super interesting, the way you have connected two opposite ends, because sometimes you watch something that really moves you, but then you're left with nothing to do about it. And then on the other hand, someone gets to you on the street asking you for money for a certain cause, and you're like,
I have no
too
context.
cold for that. Yeah.
And it's that opportunity. It's exactly that opportunity, that it's such a missed opportunity. If you're watching a film and you're into the topic, that you're like, oh my god, I had no idea, I want to do something. But then with all good intentions, 5 minutes later you might think about the laundry that you need to do, or like something else, and then you're having all these intentions, and then it can also very quickly, unfortunately, fade again. So it's that moment that people are still engaged with a topic, is the moment to also give them the right tools or links to like continue their learning journey, or give them ways on what they can do in their own sort of like neighborhoods, or different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that moment. I always have that moment when I've watched a movie. I just need like 1 or 2 minutes at the end to like process the whole story and everything. And if there was a pop-up to be like, do this, I'd be like, perfect, that's exactly what I need. And also actually just to understand, what type of concrete actions is it? I assume some of it is like maybe signing a petition, or I know some of them are writing a letter to a member of parliament, but are there other action points that you have as well?
So basically, it's a very flexible system at the moment. We obviously have our bigger impact campaigns, but then also we want to make it scalable to have always some kind of an action across every film. First off, not every film has always a relevant actions, but most of them do. And at the moment, it's a very linear approach. So at the moment, you watch a movie and take an action. So that action can be it can be a petition, it can be a donation, you can learn more, you can attend an event. It could literally be what's the most relevant thing to do after watching. But yeah, we're in the moment of really experimenting and testing and updating our product to give more flexibility here, because at the moment it's one action connected to a film, but not everyone wants to do the same thing, and not everyone has the same amount of time or money or the same interest. So how can we be more responsible and flexible with this, and really look at the different types of actions that you have, from like very local ones to global ones to high effort, low effort, and we're really in the midst of testing it out. So what kind of actions do people really want to take? How do they want to be involved? How much time does it can it cost? So it's finding that balance between what's the most impactful action, but also tailoring it to the user needs and how they want to be involved, because we know that like 77% wants to create change, but only 30% know how. And so that's one part of it. With the bigger campaigns, we really work very closely with the filmmakers, the nonprofits, the activists, to really collaboratively strategize and find out what is the biggest impact that we can have with a film or a campaign. What does success mean? It's often then not just the petition signature, but it's also the broader awareness. It's also making sure that the right people are seeing the film. So in that cases, we would also take the film outside of our platform and host screenings amongst the right people that needs to see it. So it's a really then hybrid approach. Then impact is a little bit more broader. But yeah, on the platform we're in the moment, we're testing out different ways on how people can get involved, and definitely we also notice that a lot of people are interested in being part of a community, or meeting like-minded people or being able to discuss some topics and see what other people are doing and getting inspired from other people and not feeling alone. So that's also something that we're going to like figure out this year, and going to scale up a little bit on like, okay, how could we facilitate more screening events where people come together to not only watch the film but also discuss it. How can we integrate any type of actions in those? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. One of the questions I also already had planned for you was to kind of understand how important offline events were for these types of for these types of movies, because I remember when like I was a teenager, I went to a screening of like a climate documentary, and it just impacted me so much more than watching it at home by myself, like on Netflix or whatever. And so you guys, how do you also kind of organize it financially? Because WaterBear is like 100% free. There are no ads. So where does the money come from to organize all of these cool things?
Yeah, good question. So indeed, we're completely free. There are no ads, but we do work with a brand funded model. So part of it is of course impact investors, but then that's not a sustainable way to like sustain our company over time because we're not a non-profit. So we have a brand funded model, which means that we produce a lot of productions for brands that also have a purpose and a mission and that believe in storytelling as a tool instead of your traditional corporate marketing film, for example. So we have brands that would support very important stories that also align with their mission. So we just released, for example, a 3-part series with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They are the expert in circularity. So we came together and really like they have a challenge on how to create how to make circularity mainstream, how to make it more appealing to people. It's such an abstract concept, it's very economical, but it can really affect our day-to-day lives. And how can we inspire more people through solutions, to stories, to startups, to innovations on how you could live differently and how circularity makes a role in that. So that's an example. Or what else did we do? So we brought together, for example, a brand, Jack Wolfskin, with an NGO that both really cared about the conservation of a national park. That's part of their mission and the NGO's mission. So together they funded the film. So we also have that approach that partly it's funded by a brand and NGO, and sort of the impact goes beyond the film. So it's not just the film asset that a brand can use or an NGO can use over time, but also with the film we then engage people to help support that, protect that national park. So it's really then embedded again, not only in the story but also in the action after that also can still impact an NGO over time. So that's the main thing. It's that brand funded model. And then there's 3 ways we produce, of course, then, but we can also distribute these films on our platform and then have marketing around them. So it's the whole package that we would then offer.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so in terms of like, since you're working with so many brands, I assume they also want to kind of get some data on like results and stuff. I think I saw somewhere that you guys like the first brand to collect data, like impact data, through like surveys of your viewers and stuff.
Yeah.
How does that work? And do you have like any numbers that you could share with us in terms of? I just think that it's so interesting that a brand can collect impact data from its users.
Definitely. And this is also something that we want to roll out more scalable because we're now very much testing it with separate projects. So, for example, with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we can target people who viewed the film or the episode or the series and ask them specific questions about it. So how did the film even change your mindset or not at all? Do you feel that you have more knowledge about the circular economy? Do you feel you understand it more? Do you consider making a change based on your own behavior, based on the film, yes or no? So we're trying really, you always have an approach of quantitative and qualitative data, but quantitative data is important in terms of the reach and engagement and how many actions people took. That's already like more than a standard sort of, I guess, media company, well, the actions taken then would do. But the best thing is to combine it with qualitative data to really understand the further impacts. And then still, to be honest, it's not perfect because it's measuring the short-term data. Like it's how you're answering now. But if I would survey you again in 6 months, did your behavior really change? Did your view really change? Did you make it like, so it's, the model is still not perfect, but that's what I'm saying. And as a perfectionist, as an impact lead, I'm like always like, yes, it's great, but how does this affect long term? And we're still too early to really measure that. So it's, but I think that's where it also becomes interesting. But it's also where the challenge lies. So how do you do that in a scalable way? And of course, there's a role that a film can play, right? But if you look at the bigger sort of, let's say, policy changes or something, a film can play a crucial role, but often it's not just the film that would be the key reason that policy would change. Obviously, there would be so many more actors around it, so many more experts, but film and storytelling can really bring those people together, can really like convince people in a more humanized, emotional way. So we see it as a powerful tool to really, use it for that change. But I think, and I think that's across every impact documentary maker or impact campaigner or in the film industry. It's always finding ways on like, okay, how did this film make people do something different or feel something different? So we use a combination of quantitative and qualitative methodologies. And just to get a little bit more deeper into the reasoning and the motives, but also in the feedback, and also like if it wasn't impactful, what should you, or what did you wish the type of actions are that you could do, etc.
That's super interesting because I think we are all now in a moment trying to figure out how to communicate sustainability or impact, how to impact people to change behaviors, and kind of you're gathering all of this knowledge and you're able to tell brands or NGOs, okay, this has been done before, this didn't work, this didn't cause impact when you go there in the long term. So I think it's super interesting for the different companies. And also, Jolien, I wanted to ask you, like, who's your audience now? And do you want to stick to that, or where's your limit? Where do you want to go?
Yeah, good question. I think when we started, I guess the natural initial audience that would follow us or download our app would be people that were part of the film industry or has a very high interest in films, and especially nature documentaries, because that's where we started initially a little bit with the network of the founder, but also the NGOs that we were supporting, the content that was on the platform. So you have this audience that is very, that has a high affinity with film and with nature already. So
already converted. Yeah.
Very dark green audience, let's say, they converted. But obviously what we want to do, and what everyone wants to do, I guess, it's how do you convert the unconverted? So how do you increase that reach over time? So I guess you start with that smaller audience that's already engaged, and it's still important to have them and to continuously sort of like engage with this audience and educate them. But ultimately we want to reach people that long term that might not even care now about climate, and we want to convert them. But that's we're also like very conscious that takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of money. Like it's not the easiest thing to do. And we've done a lot of research and deep dives, especially in the UK market, because that's going to be a little bit more of a focus market over this year, at least, even though we're a global platform, but also to make it a little bit more specific. There's still a super large audience in the UK that already knows about climate, but maybe is not super engaged, or they want to do more, they want to create change, but they don't really know how. There's a lot of like sort of light green audiences, let's call them like that as well, and that audience is huge, and that's, I think, the first one that we're going to tap into now, because we just noticed that going immediately for the unconverted and convincing them, like that will take a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort. That's ultimately where we want to go, but there's still a large audience in the middle that is continuously to sort of like being interested and engaged with it, but not fully yet. And I think that's now where our focus will be, and also our focus will be on using storytelling to really like enable that question that people have of like, where do I start, what can I do, how do I want to be involved, and testing that kind of the different actions again that we spoke about earlier. So that's really an aspiring change maker is sort of what's then the internal word. And I think that group is definitely already big enough to focus on, and to making sure that these people feel that they can make an impact in their daily lives, that can continuously to engage with different topics. Because obviously if you're aware about one topic, let's say climate, it doesn't mean that you might already know about what's happening in circularity or human rights or any like other issues that are linked to that. So there's always an ongoing education, I think, that the power of storytelling can still have, but also really on that question on like, what can I do now that I know slowly about all of these things happening, like what's my role in this. So yeah, we're figuring out how we can make a bigger role in that for us.
And also, I guess, kind of seeing those links of the people that really care about these topics and sustainability impact, and what do they share with people that don't care so much about this? Like, is it the ocean? Is it surf? Is it cars?
Exactly.
Whatever. Is it the
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're also finding that middle ground of like connecting entertainment with impact, we're saying. So how can we use humor or music or different styles of docufiction to get people in, or trying to like tell the story through sports or through, there's so many ways that people, and so many passion points that people have, and how can you link the conversation with the passion points of people, and that's where people really go, oh shit, I didn't knew that, or I don't want this like to go away, or like what can I do? So it's like, it's definitely that, because I also don't think, and we have that as a value as well, that like the climate storytelling and storytelling around sustainability doesn't always have to be super serious or very, I guess serious is the right word, very doom and gloom, very negative. And of course, that's also the reality. But to get people with you and to create that movement, you also have to approach it from like a more positive and solutions focused angles, because otherwise we would say like we go from doomerism to doomorism, sort of. Otherwise, people, the worst thing that can happen is that people feel there's no point, right? And there's like everything is already screwed and it's so much negativity. No one wants to like watch something very negative or heavy after a day of work. That's just the reality. So how can you still engage people in this conversation in a way that fits for them and doesn't mean that you take anything away from them, but that it's still, you can still live a beautiful life with, in a different way, and showing those inspiring and realistic examples on how we could change is I think super, super important.
And Julian, with the humor part, I was thinking on the movie of Don't Look Up of Jennifer Lawrence. Are you focused on documentaries, or are you planning on doing kind of more movies with a metaphor behind it?
Yeah, I'd say more documentaries, but then also we have experimented and we will do still with a sort of docu-fiction style. So then it's still based on a story, but it's more played story, let's say. So we have done it in the past, and it's definitely something that we want to experiment further. I think there's a lot of experimentation that we can still do in a documentary sort of like genre, where there's going to be a release like at the end of the year, a sort of eco thriller, but it's also played, but then it's based on like real events that are happening and still happening. We've used in the latest production Rebels with a Cause, like some UK, very specific UK humor to engage an audience. And so yeah, there's definitely different ways to not think only about a documentary as your 1.5 hour long documentary that I'm watching,
Siesta
like,
time.
the beginning, the middle, and the end, and oh shit, and there's often like a tiny part at the end that is then like hopeful, or this is what we can do, but the major story is sort of like quite diary. Yeah, so we and that's why we also experiment with different lengths. So also we find that 15 minutes, 20 minutes is a perfect already time frame to engage people in a topic. Like you don't have to talk about it for an hour and a half long. Like often like the message can be, you can make the message in like 50 minutes, sometimes even in like 5 or 6. We had one music a mix between music and film documentary last year. Or was it already 2 years ago? The time is going so fast. With Ludovico Einaudi, he's like a quite a famous pianist in Italy. And it was through his sort of piano music and then through visual that you would see the journey from, it was about bird poaching, but the journey from a bird from in Southeast Asia to in someone's cage. But the story was told through the music, through his through visuals, and in 5 minutes it's very clear like what the impact is of that, and like, whoa, I've never realized like what was happening there. So I think there's many ways to tell a story.
Yeah. And there's so much creative freedom around it as well, which I think is something that really catches people. I mean, even just the format of like films and series and stuff, it works so well with like creating the community almost through FOMO. You know, when everybody is just talking about a series that you haven't seen, and then you're like, oh shit, I guess I'll go home and watch that series because everybody keeps talking about it. I feel like this would be such a good way to kind of create that that buzz, and that works really well by starting with like the dark green and getting them to all talk about it a lot, then moving to the light green, then moving, and you kind of grow in this way.
Exactly.
And Jolien, would you like to become an inspiration to the other, the Netflixes, the HBOs to produce content like this, or this is going to be your space and they can focus on theirs?
Yeah, I think the bigger commercial streaming platforms have varied their own way on how they create films. Like obviously it would be amazing if we could be an inspiration to them, but I think I'm not sure if we can call ourselves already that, like we're so small compared to them. But we do see also in the Netherlands, when I speak to specific broadcasters here on streaming platforms, we do see there's definitely a need and a belief that they have to tell more stories about climate, or they have to like integrate climate into the storyline, let's say, into the characters and how they behave and how they speak with each other. So how can you naturally plot it into the storyline itself, or add more of those films, because they're seeing that the wider audience is just asking more about this. But I guess we're a little bit different in a sense that at the moment we're quite like have a similar approach to a streaming platform, but we're actually wanting to move away from streaming and passive viewing to more that active participation and active engagement, and also explore more what that can be through a film, but that can also be through a very short film or through a long form article or through different ways on how you can engage with a topic. So how can we experiment a little bit more also on the media format side, to see, to engage more people and to bring them in a conversation, but also ultimately to give them the tools to do something. So I think it would be amazing if like the bigger streaming platforms also would produce and tell more stories, and not only about climate but also the way how it's produced. So also, that how you're producing the film and with who you're producing on sort of like the invisible side of the story is also super important. And unfortunately, the film industry is quite like an unequal industry. It's often the same sort of type of filmmakers that would get the awards or would get the money to produce the film, or like it's quite a specific group. And especially within the documentary genre, you have to like think like, okay, but that's not an accurate representation of the world, and how many stories or narrative or perspectives are we missing because only this type of audience is telling us what is happening with the world or is telling us about this topic. So also that side of the thing, I think the industry needs to do so much more, and that's definitely one of the values that we also have. Like when we produce documentaries, we try to do it as sustainable as possible. We don't fly people around the world. We work with local filmmakers, but also what can we do? What can we do more? It's the first time that we're measuring sort of the demographics and all of that around the filmmakers that we've supported in the past, and we really want to have a bigger impact on this side as well, within the industry. So making sure that the right people are telling their stories, and it's not someone from the UK that's telling the story about someone else living in another country. Like it needs to be the ownership and the authentic representation needs to be there as well. And that's something that the industry, like, it's a long way to go for the industry to like go there.
Yeah, 100%. That's so interesting, because I definitely think that that's missing. But in film in general, like not even just in documentary, in the whole industry, there's just a bit of a lack of different representations. And I like this idea of working with local filmmakers. How do you have like a network already, or do you kind of reach out to people that you don't know? How do you make sure that can happen everywhere?
Yeah, a bit of both. So we're using a technology, it's called map.me. And so it's sort of like a map where we have like around the world where you can click on a country and you would see all the filmmakers and the writers and the directors in the country. So we've built that network over time, but also all the time, like we get requests, or we find new filmmakers through events or through partnerships, and then we would add it to the network. So then if there's a story that needs to be told, so, and either the story comes from the local filmmakers, or from an NGO, or from a brand, or could come from anywhere, or we develop it in house for a specific assignment or for ourselves. And then we would always see like who's like, if the story is, for example, set in Colombia, okay, let's find the Colombian film team. Where do we have the connections, and where can they find then the other writers or directors, and trying to find that team together in that country. And then we would remotely oversee that process from Amsterdam, but the production and all of that is then happening in the local country. So we're currently doing an analysis of the different sort of filmmakers and network that we have over the world, and where our biggest gaps are, to see. And then there's so many partnerships and so many like databases online that would promote like people that often have like a bit of a distance to the film industry or don't really have those network. Like it's really about that as well. Like it's not only about demographics but also about, I guess, privilege and network and everything around that. But thankfully, like the internet is also can use so much good things as well. So there's a lot of databases and great organizations that really have the goal to increase that inclusivity in the film industry. So yeah, that's also a proactive way for us to like reach out to those organizations and add them to our database of filmmakers.
And Jolien, how do you get the story? So you told us how you get kind of the team that's going to produce it, but do people pitch it to you or how does it go?
It can come from very different angles. Sometimes the NGOs have a great story on the ground that they feel this needs to be told, but we don't have like the money or the resources, and then we would try to find like internally, okay, is there a brand that we could match it with, before we also put our own money in, and we still do that, but we try to then do a co-production model. So it can come from NGOs, it can come from the brands themselves, it can come from filmmakers. Sometimes it's individuals, and sometimes we develop ourselves in-house. So yeah, it can come from various angles. There's a team internally that is responsible for both the sort of like the production and development, but also the acquisition of films, because we also get a lot of films, of course, our way and asking if we could distribute it. And then the distribution part is really depending on, okay, does it fit our editorial style? Plus, does it align with like the impact teams that we also have internally? So yeah, it really can come from from every angle. There's often too many great ideas and not enough financing. That's the biggest challenge. There's so many great ideas and so many great people all over the world, and it doesn't even have to be a big story. It can also be a very local story about this individual that is doing this amazing thing in this country that could inspire so many other people. And that's also a little bit how we're looking at like stories. It's like it's
what is like the piece that has had the most impact that you guys have seen so far? Like, is there one story that you've just been like, I can't believe the impact that has come out of this story through WaterBear, and was it a surprise, or do you guys kind of know the results that a story is going to get based on like how niche it is or how like easily relatable it is and this type of stuff?
It's actually really hard to predict upfront, like what the impact will be and when are you happy with the impact and the results and what do we really want to achieve, also short term versus long term. There's and how big or how small does that impact need to be? I think it's very difficult to know that upfront. I think one of the campaigns that I feel really closely with and where I saw like different angles of impact as well, maybe naively unexpected, but was maybe with the docu-fiction that we did. It was about a year ago, called Matar. And that was around refugee rights in the UK and sort of the lack of rights that they have in the UK. But we did this film. This film was directed and produced and edited and written from people that came from Syria to the UK, that fled their own country and their family and friends from the war and tried to have a better life in the UK, and all the obstacles and all the challenges that they face. And we really wanted to like tell that personal story and reflection through a docufiction format. But of course, the whole process and whole story and the direction came from people who had these lived experiences, right? And we had a way more hands-off approach. And so the whole filmmaking process was already quite special because you see the impact that it also has on them, of course, of retelling this story and making sure that other people are hearing it and what kind of impact we can make. So it was already that, but also we then collaborated further with lots of local nonprofits in the NGO that are campaigning for refugee rights to see how can this film help in their work. We did a big premiere event. We did a pop-up event in central London to engage the people on the street with these topics, but then through films and spoken word and through art and photography. And we connected it to a campaign because there was just a new legislation being announced in the UK that would send people back to either Rwanda or the country that they came from. And it was a very inhumane and also an illegal bill that they were going to propose. So we changed everything last minute because we had a very different campaign, but this came up, and like 2 days before launch, like the the filmmakers and the people involved from the community said, this is so important that we talk about this. We need to like change all of our plans. This needs to be the key thing that we connect the film to. So that's what we did. We created with the NGOs and with them like a sort of letter, pre-written letter that everyone could send to their MPs to ask to like stop this bill. And we had in that first weekend in London, we had 5,000 people signing these letters to their MPs. There was so much engagement, MPs also responding to it. But the biggest impact, I think, was when we also did a film screening to people in the community who are still sort of stuck in the process in the UK, who came to the UK, but are still stuck in the process of not being able to work, not being able to rent anything, are sort of in this limbo phase. And we did the screening also with this audience, and the filmmakers who fled, their country themselves, did the speech and like how they went through it, and sort of that impact, even if that was just the 15 people that were there in the room, was just so, yeah, for me that was huge. And then of course, like, it's great that 5,000 people in the UK would like write a letter to the MP asking to stop and be so involved, and like seeing these people being so engaged, that was already amazing. But also just those 10-15 people from the community themselves, on how this film could help them and this discussion could help them, was even more impact. And then we also got like some awards from that, but that's even then, that's not really, that's always nice, but that was never ever the goal of it. Yeah,
I think that's so interesting that I think the impact will often come to a topic that is very like fresh in the news, or when there's something happening in like the political sphere or in the social sphere at the same time. But that must be obviously really hard to coordinate, because you can't like, make a documentary in 2 days just because there's something coming up. Like,
exactly. And that's the biggest, like, we've always had some kind of a challenge happening right before the launch of the campaign, that you're like, okay, no, we need to like tailor this completely, or we need to like stop for a day and be on pause, or whatever it was. Like we had one small campaign at the early start about shark conservation, and really showing the numbers, for example, on only 6 people get killed by sharks every year, but like we kill millions of them, and like exposing that whole shark industry and like how important they are for the ecosystem. And the day before launch, someone unfortunately got killed by a shark in the ocean, and it was one of those rare events. But we were like, okay, this is like not ideal, of course, in terms of timing. We even had discussions with, we even felt from an ethical way, could we still like release it? And then we even had discussions with the family of this person. But they were like, he was a surfer and he was so passionate about ocean conservation and shark conservation. He would have wanted that you still would share the story, because he always knew he was in the territory of the shark, and how sad, like how extreme it is. But that was also an eye opener for me, that even the family was still like, no, you still need to tell it. And it's so sad, of course, that this happened, but that risk is always there. And it's a very, very rare risk. But it's one of those, that you're like, yeah, what do you do? And we have another documentary coming up at the end of the year that is around an oil tanker that was set on the coast of Yemen. And this whole story is ready, but we're still very much strategizing like how to do it, because there's a big war going on there right now on the coast of Yemen, and there's a lot of political involvement. So it's whatever happens in the world is very also important on how you launch a film, and the messaging around it, the timing. Because if you have the right timing and the right message, it can help to extend that impact a lot, or it can really negatively impact. And yeah, that's definitely not what we want to have.
After these stories, I think if there's someone that doesn't want to log in the platform and to sign in and to watch this, I got goosebumps.
I now regret not having spent the entire podcast just asking you to tell us about all the different stories you guys have.
Amazing. I was thinking on the first one that you need a new name for that kind of movies. It's kind of a biography of these people. They are telling their story. They are themselves the people producing it. It's like not even it's like a different thing completely. And you were speaking, and this is going to be my last questions because we're in the end. But you were speaking about how you're trying to expand beyond what you do at the moment, maybe, and how to expand this impact. Is it expanding in awareness, like having real-time events or like this kind of things, or is it expanding kind of in the impact, as you were saying, kind of creating these petitions or kind of becoming activists? And if so, kind of when you do these petitions to the MP that you were saying before, do you have an expert that advises you on policy? Is that you because you're the impact director, or how does it work?
Yeah, I think that to first that last part. So we always work with sort of people that are policymakers, NGOs, in our network, or that we try to like get to know via. I wish I was that person, but I'm not. Um, and that's also the biggest challenge, I guess, from my role as sort of the impact person is like knowing everything about what's happening, even from like business certification to the impact topics that are happening to the whole NGO landscape to how you measure it. Like it's quite big, and it's trying to figure out, okay, where are your skills, and with who do you need to collaborate that is doing this for 10-15 years, and we're very open about that as well. That's also why we work with lots of NGOs and that we try to make them leading in sort of like or campaign strategies for the bigger campaigns. These people have worked on this topic for like 10-15 years, so how, and they want to share their knowledge, because we can also help them again with like giving them content pieces to extend their work. So it's really that collaborative approach that is 100% fundamental, because we're talking about so many different topics and we just can't be the expert on everything.
Super sensible topic.
You know, we're experts on storytelling and how you put it in a market, and we know a lot about these topics through or research and through everything already. But if we really want to go deeper, or if there's a specific policy need, like we need to find the people that are experts in that field. So that's always what we want to try to do, and really let us guide also from experience from, you know, the big NGOs who were campaigning for this for like 10-15 years, like what has worked for you and what hasn't worked, and how do we need to find that balance between how our tone of voice is and on our brand and our audience versus that need. And yeah, and your beginning question, I think it's multiple layers. So the awareness side, definitely always it starts there. I know that everyone is saying it, but the reach and the awareness is just super important to start there. We're going to do that still through like online films and other media formats, but also we're going to have a few more premiere events or community screenings events that we're starting off with in London. To bring people together, because as we said at the beginning, like it's that if you really watch a film in a good setting and with the right people, like it touches your heart so much more, and and the impact that a film can have is so much more visible in a room with people than if you're watching it at home on your couch. So yeah, but we need to find a balance there with the amount of time that it will cost. Like we also creating a lot of different toolkits that other organizations can host their own screening events with our films, and then we support them with all the materials and tips and tricks on how to run it and what kind of survey questions you can ask after, or like any discussion points. So we also want to extend sort of and scale that impact through giving other organizations and grassroots organizations the tools to host a screening, and that's happening quite a lot. Like we had, I think, around 100 screening facilitated screening opportunities last year, and it's something that we want to like increase way more this year as well.
Yeah, I like that, because that's so easily scalable, because then it's just like whoever wants to do it will do it wherever they want to do it with whoever, like
Exactly.
that's really great. And so I think we're already at the end of our time with you, which is really sad, because I feel like we could have carried on for ages. But if you were to just recommend like one story for us, particularly here at Crowd Farming and for our listeners, is there one story on WaterBear that you think you would recommend specifically for us?
Oh, that's a good question. There's so many stories. I mean, but I'm biased, but it's a very like it's again that story that I told at the beginning. So that's the story of Matar, the refugee rights. But there's Matar, and then the making of Matar, so that you see like the stories and the whole making of process and their stories and and their challenges. I still think that's so beautiful, because that shows the power of film, both on screen but also behind the screens and on so many different levels. I think that one is just beautiful. But if you want to have a little bit more of a lighter one, I really like it. Depends on the type of humor, but I really like our latest production, Rebels with a Cause, that it's about guerrilla gardening, and it's using humor, but also it's a very like easy way as an individual on how you can get involved in a sort of fun way to make your city more greener or your environment more greener. So I really like that one as well. But yeah, there's so many. Like every week in the newsletter, we're trying to highlight 5 films, and like it's a mix of old and new films and in different sort of like thematic areas. So so many more.
That's so cool. Thank you so much. I remember seeing the guerrilla gardening one, and then like there was a how to become a guerrilla gardener as well part, which was just awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Jolien, for taking the time to speak with us twice. Yeah. It's been really great. I think. Do you have any more questions?
Maybe the one about the what makes you no?
I was gonna skip it this time.
Okay.
But like, we can do it. We just usually finish our podcast with a question, also because our podcast is called WTF, as in what the field, and so we like to finish our podcast asking our guests, what is one thing that has just really made you think, what the fuck, since you've started working in whatever you're working in? So like, is there like a fact, a number, a story, a person, or anything that since you've started in this has just made you really like have an eye-opening experience, or just be like, what the fuck, how is this possible?
Oh my god, that's a difficult question. There's so many what the fucks and so many small what the fucks. Like literally every story, I'm sometimes like, why is this happening? I didn't knew this was happening. I think one of the biggest, I guess, what the fucks is when I learned through different stories about different types of colonialism that are still happening right now, that you would think like it's history, but it's still happening right now, but in a different way that you weren't maybe fully aware of. So that could be either all the how do you say this English word, like all the fashion that is being shipped to other countries, or all the electronics that are being shipped to other countries, or all the waste that is being shipped to other countries to sort of deal with that. I'm like, that to me is like a big what the fuck. And then seeing some of the documentaries around that, how people live in these dumpster fields and try to make a living out of it, and there's a lot of economic value then being given to the local people, but still it's like there's a lot of those kind of like streams and ways that we still have in our society that is still very much linked to like the global north, global west, and how Western countries are still sort of like capitalizing on other countries. And that to me is still like a biggest, how can it still happen like today? But that's with so many things that I have. One film that's a short film that is talking about sort of like, that's more on the e-waste side of things, is Kofi and Larty on our platform. It's a short film, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And you follow these kids, and like they want to become a filmmaker, and they try to make a living there, but you're like, whoa, it's really, it's really, really sad that is still very much the reality of today.
You got another story thanks to asking the last question.
That's true. I didn't want to ask it because I didn't want to necessarily end on like a really negative note, but I guess that's too late now. But anyways, yeah, great. Well, I think I really don't want to take up more of your time, because you specifically said you had a harsh stop, so we'll let you go. But yeah, thank you so much. It's been so nice to speak with you, and I hope we'll be in touch in the future, and I'll definitely be watching everything that comes out on WaterBear, because I'm such a huge fan. And to all our listeners, you definitely have to log into WaterBear. It's literally free, and it's so amazing. So
and you got like 3 or 4 trailers.
Do a film together with you guys at some point. Like,
who
knows? Like,
that would be amazing.
We'll
definitely
take up on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much, Jolien.
Thank you.